Hello, this is Mrs. Klein.
Hi, it's Miss Burkles.
We're here with your Lesson 37 podcast entitled The Spread and Impact of the Reformation. If you want to follow along in your book, you guys, we're on page 515 right now.
Our guiding question is, what were the effects of the Reformation? And our vocab words are absolute monarchy, Anglicanism, Calvinism, Counter-Reformation, Lutheranism, nationalism, Puritans, and theocracy.
All right, in this lesson, you're going to learn more about the movement called the Reformation and the Protestant churches that emerged in the 1500s. The growth of Protestantism also helped to encourage a reform movement within the Catholic Church called the Counter-Reformation.
The many divisions among Christians led to a series of wars and persecutions. The Reformation brought much conflict to Europe, but it also created many new forms of the Christian faith. Three new branches of Christianity that developed early in the period were Lutheranism, Calvinism, and Anglicanism.
All right, Lutheranism. The first major Protestant sect was Lutheranism. Lutheranism began in Germany after Martin Luther was excommunicated by the Catholic Church in 1521.
Luther and his followers disagreed with the Catholic Church about sin and salvation. Lutherans did not believe that people could do anything to earn salvation, rather, it was God's gift which people received in faith. People would be justified or saved if they sincerely believed in Jesus Christ, were sorry for their sins, and accepted the words of the Bible as truth.
All right. Lutherans rejected traditional sources of religious authority, such as church councils and the Pope, and instead believed that the Bible was the only true source of religious guidance.
Prayers were written and spoken in German, not in Latin, so that everyone could participate. Instead of having 7 sacraments, Lutherans had just 2, baptism and communion, which Luther believed were the only sacraments clearly named in the Bible.
All right. Over time, Martin Luther, preached less about the Bible and instead started to place greater importance on discipline and strong families. Unlike Catholic priests, Lutheran ministers or members of the clergy were allowed to marry. Luther himself married a former nun.
Wow. Calvinism, Section 2, was founded by John Calvin, a French humanist who did his most influential work in Geneva, Switzerland. Calvin maintained that God knew from the beginning of time who would be saved and who would be condemned, an idea called predestination.
Calvinists had many strict rules defining good behavior. Like Lutherans, Calvinists thought that the Bible was the only true source of religious guidance. Consequently, in a Calvinist state, religious rules also became government laws, meaning that anyone who sinned was also committing a crime.
Wow. Calvinist churchgoers attended services up to 5 times a week. Services included sermons that lasted for hours and that explained how to live according to the Bible.
Like Lutherans, Calvinists used only 2 sacraments they found in the Bible: baptism and communion.
Calvinists believed that each community should be a theocracy, or a state governed by God through religious leaders.
Okay, all right, moving on to Anglicanism. Anglicanism was founded in 1534 by King Henry VIII in England. Politically, Henry did not want to share either his power or his kingdom's wealth with the church. Personally, he wanted to get a divorce so that he could marry another woman, Anne Boleyn.
Like Catholics, Anglicans believed that baptism washed away original sin. Anglicans, however, were also influenced by Protestant ideas and accepted Luther's idea of justification for faith.
All right. The English monarch, as head of the church, was the main interpreter of the Bible's meaning.
2 versions of the Anglican Church service developed. The High Church service was much like the Catholic Mass and very formal, whereas the Low Church service was similar to the Lutheran service.
Like other Protestant groups, Anglicans used only 2 sacraments, baptism and communion. English slowly replaced Latin in Anglican services.
Henry VIII's daughter, Queen Elizabeth I, said that no one should be forced to believe or practice a particular kind of Anglicanism.
All right, now we're talking about the Counter-Reformation. As I can't say that one, Protestantism, there we go, spread, the Catholic Church responded with a program of serious reform. It clarified its teachings, corrected abuses, and tried to win people back to Catholicism. This movement is known as the Counter-Reformation.
A major feature of the Counter-Reformation was the Council of Trent. In response to Protestant ideas, the council gave a more precise statement of Catholic teachings.
All right, the council's work brought a higher standard of morality to the church's clergy and leadership, while its statement of Catholic belief and practices helped to unify the church.
Many individuals and groups helped to reform the church and spread its message. The Jesuits were founded by Ignatius of Loyola, a Spanish nobleman.
The Jesuits were dedicated teachers and missionaries who founded schools and colleges. They brought many Europeans back to the church and also worked to spread Catholicism in Africa, Asia, and the Americas. They became the largest order in the church and actively supported the Pope.
The Catholic Church also fought the spread of Protestantism by condemning beliefs that it considered to be errors and by dealing harshly with those it labeled as heretics.
All right. Now, to deal with the heresies during the Middle Ages, the church had established the Inquisition. This body was made up of clergy called inquisitors who sought out and tried heretics.
In Rome, the Pope established a new Inquisition. The Roman Inquisition similarly sought out and condemned people whose views were considered dangerous.
All right, now moving on to the effects of the Reformation. The religious divisions of the Reformation led to a series of wars and persecutions during the 16th and 17th centuries.
Bloody civil wars erupted in many countries. In France, for example, wars between Catholics and Protestants between 1562 and 1598 left over 1 million dead.
Holy moly. The 30 Years' War ended in 1648 with the signing of the Peace of Westphalia, a treaty that called for peace between Protestants and Catholics. By deciding the control of the territory, it set boundaries between Catholic and Protestant lands. This religious division survived for many centuries.
The spread of Protestantism went hand in hand with a growing feeling called nationalism. Increasingly, people identified with their nation rather than with their local area or lord. Along with nationalism, monarchies were also growing stronger.
This way of thinking reached its height in the late 17th and early 18th centuries when some rulers established absolute monarchies. Yet the Reformation also planted the seeds of democratic ideas and practices.
Some persecuted groups sought freedom to worship in their own ways. For example, the Calvinist Puritans fled England for North America in search of religious liberty.
All right, by the time of the Reformation, Europeans had embarked upon a great age of exploration. As they voyaged around the world, both Catholics and Protestants worked to spread their faith. You guys, I just want to let you know, I'm going to talk about the 3 G's because it ties in with this like age of exploration. God, glory, and gold were like the 3 main reasons that people went to explore. And so the spreading of whether it was Protestant faith or Catholic faith is one of the reasons that people explore new territories.
Nice. So, for our lesson summary, we have Lutheranism, Calvinism, and Anglicanism. Started by Martin Luther in 1521, Lutheranism was the first Protestant sect. Calvinism was started by John Calvin in Switzerland in 1541, and the Anglican Church was founded when English King Henry VIII separated from the Catholic Church in 1534. All 3 sects believed that the Bible was the only religious authority and rejected all sacraments except for baptism and communion. Services were held in the vernacular, not Latin. Clergy could marry, and unlike Lutherans and Anglicans, Calvinists believed in predestination, that salvation of, quote, the elect was predetermined by God. They also believed that the Bible should form the basis for secular as well as religious law.
All right, the Counter-Reformation. The Catholic Church responded to Protestantism with the Counter-Reformation, a period of serious reform. At the Council of Trent, Catholic leaders created a more precise statement of Catholic belief and worked to end corruption. Reformers, such as the Jesuits, actively fought the spread of Protestantism through missionary work and the Inquisition.
Effects of the Reformation. By the end of the wars that followed the Reformation, medieval Europe was largely a thing of the past. The Peace of Westphalia in 1648 set boundaries between Catholic and Protestant lands. This religious division survived into modern times and spread to wherever Europeans controlled territory around the world. In the period following the Reformation, Europe experienced a rise in nationalism and a strengthening of the monarchies. Yet, Protestantism also led to the beginnings of modern democracy.
All right, you guys. So now we've got the guiding question, which was what were the effects of the Reformation? And then don't forget about those vocabulary terms.
Absolute monarchy, Anglicanism, Calvinism, Counter-Reformation, Lutheranism, nationalism, Puritans, and theocracy.
All right, see you.
See you later.